He is the golden idol who transforms human hearts into treasure vaults, whose whispered promises turn divine purpose into earthly obsession, making slaves of those who think they're becoming masters. But what ancient power birthed this demon of endless appetite, and why does his influence strike at the very core of human spiritual freedom? This is Demonology Explained, and today we're exploring the question, who is Mammon, and how has this entity of infinite greed wielded the power of materialism to enslave souls while convincing them they're achieving success? The ancient appetite. Most people think money is just paper and numbers. They see wealth as a tool, possessions as conveniences, success as achievement. But what if I told you that behind every credit card swipe, every investment decision, every "I deserve this" purchase, there lurks something far more sinister? What if materialism isn't just about wanting things, but about serving something that wants you? Meet Mammon, not just greed, not just materialism, the actual spiritual force that ancient peoples recognized as the most seductive destroyer of human souls. Because while other demons might attack your body or mind, Mammon attacks something deeper, your very reason for existing. And here's the shocking, Partha doesn't make you poor. He makes you rich, successful, admired, all while slowly devouring everything that actually matters about your life. In the beginning, wealth was supposed to serve a sacred purpose. Ancient civilizations understood something we've forgotten. Material resources aren't neutral. They're either tools for divine purpose or idols that replace divine purpose. There's no middle ground. But here's what most people don't know. Mammon wasn't originally a demon at all. The word simply meant wealth or possessions in ancient Aramaic. It was Jesus himself who transformed this neutral term into something terrifying when he declared, "You cannot serve both God and Mammon." Think about that statement. Not, "It's hard to serve both." Not, "You shouldn't serve both." You cannot. It's literally impossible. Because Mammon isn't just about having stuff. It's about worshipping stuff. And worship can only have one object. The ancient world understood something we've forgotten. Every act of acquisition is simultaneously an act of worship. Every financial decision declares what you ultimately value. Every purchase is a prayer to either the God who created everything or the force that wants to own everything. But what happens when that force gets personal? What happens when Mammon stops being about things and becomes about transforming you into a thing? That's where our story really begins. We have to journey back to the earliest civilizations, where wealth carried sacred responsibility. In ancient Hebrew culture, material blessing was understood as divine trust. You didn't own your possessions, you stewarded them. Your wealth wasn't for display, it was for service. The concept was revolutionary. Imagine viewing every dollar, every possession, every resource as belonging ultimately to God and temporarily entrusted to your care. Your job wasn't to accumulate as much as possible, but to use what you had as wisely as possible. This created something beautiful, wealth that served community rather than ego, success that lifted others rather than excluding them, material blessing that pointed towards spiritual purpose rather than replacing it. But here's the crucial insight. The same resources that could serve divine purpose could also corrupt divine purpose. The same wealth that could build community could destroy it. The same material blessing that could express gratitude could replace gratitude. The Hebrew scriptures contain dozens of warnings about this corruption, not because money is evil, but because money is powerful, powerful enough to make you forget why you exist, powerful enough to convince you that having is more important than being. Deuteronomy warns that when people become wealthy, they tend to forget the God who gave them the ability to create wealth. Proverbs repeatedly describes how the pursuit of riches can corrupt wisdom, relationships, and spiritual understanding. These weren't random moral guidelines. They were warnings about spiritual warfare, about a force that uses material success to achieve spiritual destruction. Here's where everything changes. Jesus didn't just warn about the dangers of wealth. He personified those dangers. When he said, "You cannot serve God and Mammon," he wasn't talking about money as a thing. He was talking about money as a master. Suddenly, Mammon becomes more than a word. It becomes an entity, a spiritual force with personality, agenda, and methodology. A competitor for human devotion that demands exclusive loyalty. The early Christian church understood this immediately. They recognize mammon as a spiritual principality, a demonic force that specializes in corrupting human purpose through material seduction, not by making people poor, but by making them spiritually enslaved to wealth. Here's Mammon's breakthrough insight. He discovered that humans will serve anything that promises to serve them. Convince someone that money will solve their problems, and they'll solve money's problems. Convince them that possessions will make them happy, and they'll sacrifice their happiness for possessions. Medieval theologians assigned mammon specifically to the sin of greed because they recognized something terrifying. Greed isn't just wanting more stuff. It's the systematic replacement of spiritual purpose with material purpose. It's trading your soul for things that can't actually satisfy souls. Here's what makes this so dangerous. Mammon doesn't attack people who have nothing. He attacks people who have something and convinces them it's not enough. He doesn't target the poor, he targets the successful, because success makes his lies believable. Act 2. The confrontation, the golden prison, the medieval understanding, how spiritual slavery spreads. Medieval scholars didn't just study Mammon as ancient history, they documented his influence as a present reality, and what they discovered was chilling. Unlike demons that attack through obvious sin, Mammon specializes in corrupting virtue itself. He takes the natural human desire for security and provision and transforms it into spiritual obsession. He doesn't make you evil, he makes you empty while convinced you're full. Here's his methodology. First, he identifies legitimate needs: food, shelter, security, provision for family. These aren't selfish desires, they're responsible concerns. Normal human requirements for survival and flourishing. But Mammon corrupts this healthy foundation. He whispers that enough is never enough. He suggests that security requires more than provision, it requires dominance. He plants the lie that your worth is measured by your wealth. Medieval exorcists documented specific patterns in his attacks. He typically begins by drawing attention to what others have that you lack. Normal financial planning becomes obsessive accumulation. Healthy desire for security becomes paranoid hoarding. Natural appreciation for quality becomes compulsive consumption. The progression follows a predictable pattern. First, you work to live. Then you live to work. Then you become what you work for. Finally, what you work for owns you completely. The midpoint, the true nature revealed. Here's where we reach the turning point. Mammon doesn't simply inspire individual greed. He systematically transforms human beings into human havings. He turns souls into balance sheets and hearts into treasure chests. Medieval theologians understood that Mammon represents the anti-spiritual principle. He's the force that transforms human identity from who you are into what you own. Instead of I am, he creates I have. Instead of being, he creates having. His methodology becomes clear when you look at how materialism spreads through consciousness. He identifies natural human needs and legitimate desires for security. Then he systematically corrupts these needs into spiritual addictions. Where God intended material blessing to support spiritual purpose, Mammon creates material purpose that replaces spiritual blessing. Where resources should enable service, he creates service to resources. Where wealth should express gratitude, he creates wealth that demands worship. Here's the most terrifying part. He doesn't want people to be simply greedy. He wants identity itself to become impossible without possession. He wants being to be unthinkable without having. He wants spiritual purpose to be naive, and material accumulation to be the only logical approach to human existence. The crisis, the complete destruction of soul. Now we reach the climax of understanding just how devastating Mammon's influence can be. His corruption operates through multiple forms of spiritual destruction, each one designed to make authentic human existence impossible. Possessive identity. This is where it starts. Mammon whispers that you are what you own, that your worth is measured by your wealth, that your identity depends on your possessions. His victims become unable to separate who they are from what they have. Competitive accumulation. This goes deeper. Under Mammon's influence, people become convinced that life is a race to acquire more than others. That success requires not just having enough, but having more. They begin to view others' poverty as their wealth and others' loss as their gain. Addictive consumption. This is where it gets dangerous. Mammon's victims don't simply want more things. They need more things. The act of acquiring becomes more important than what's acquired. Shopping becomes therapy. Buying becomes being. Sacred materialism. This is the most insidious form. Mammon corrupts legitimate spiritual desires. He convinces his victims that material success is evidence of divine blessing. That poverty indicates spiritual failure, that their wealth is actually righteousness. Under his influence, the pursuit of money becomes indistinguishable from the pursuit of God. People become convinced that their materialism is actually spirituality, that their greed is actually wisdom. Plot point 2. The modern epidemic. Here's where ancient demonology becomes urgently relevant for today's world. Mammon's methodologies haven't disappeared. They've found perfect expression in modern consumer culture and economic systems. Social media has created the most powerful envy engine in human history. Instagram feeds full of luxury lifestyles and material achievements. TikTok videos showcasing everyone else's possessions while you're dealing with everyday budgets. You're comparing your financial reality to everyone else's financial highlights. Modern psychology has identified numerous patterns that align perfectly with ancient descriptions of Mammon's influence. Shopping, addiction, status anxiety, consumer debt crisis. The growing inability of people to find satisfaction in anything they can actually afford. The rise of influencer culture follows Mammon's exact pattern. Take natural human desires for beauty, success, and happiness, and transform them into product promotions. Make every achievement feel incomplete without the right purchase. Turn personal growth into consumer growth. Cryptocurrency and investment culture operate the same way. Instead of money serving life, life serves money. Instead of working to live, people live to trade. Instead of wealth supporting purpose, wealth becomes purpose. Credit card companies have weaponized Mammon's methodology. You deserve this. Don't wait for life. Live now. Pay later. They've turned financial responsibility into financial shame and immediate gratification into ultimate wisdom. But here's the good news. Traditional religious texts provide clear guidance for protection against Mammon's influence. And these principles work just as well today as they did thousands of years ago. The primary defense against Mammon's corruption is remembering the true purpose of material blessing, not accumulation for its own sake, but stewardship for divine purpose. Understanding that everything you have is temporarily entrusted to your care, not permanently owned by your ego. The Hebrew concept of Jubilee embodies this perfectly. Every 50 years, all debts were forgiven and all property returned to its original families. This wasn't economic policy, it was spiritual protection, a systematic prevention of the wealth accumulation that makes Mammon's lies believable. Traditional spiritual practices like tithing, generous giving, and voluntary simplicity all serve to counter the accumulation mindset that makes greed possible. These practices reinforce the truth that abundance comes from gratitude, not acquisition. The biblical account of the rich young ruler provides the perfect template. Jesus didn't tell him to become poor. He told him to stop being owned by his possessions, to choose spiritual freedom over material security. The tragedy isn't that the man was wealthy, it's that his wealth was his master. As we reach the end of our exploration of Mammon, we arrive at a crucial understanding. The transformation from neutral word to demonic entity reveals something timeless about human nature. Our tendency to make servants into masters and tools into idols. Whether you understand this as literal demonic influence or as a powerful metaphor for destructive economic patterns, Mammon represents one of humanity's most fundamental and seductive temptations. In our age of consumer culture and material obsession, the ancient warnings about the demon of greed carry more relevance than ever before. The ultimate message isn't one of fear about material success. It's about wisdom concerning its sacred purpose. Understanding Mammon's influence provides insight into the spiritual dimensions of wealth. The difference between having possessions and being possessed. In a world that constantly measures human worth by material wealth, the ancient wisdom about Mammon offers a different way. The possibility of genuine abundance, success that serves others, wealth that builds community rather than ego. You now understand the full story, from sacred stewardship to golden slavery, from neutral possession to spiritual obsession, from divine tool to demonic master. The pattern has been revealed, the methodology exposed, the ancient warnings made clear. What will you choose? The golden prison that promises freedom while delivering slavery, or the spiritual freedom that uses wealth without being used by it? The materialism that makes having more important than being, or the purpose that makes being more important than having? the path of endless accumulation, or the way of sacred stewardship. But remember this: in choosing purpose over possession, stewardship over accumulation, being over having, you're not just making a financial decision, you're participating in a spiritual battle that has raged since humans first confused what they owned with who they were. The golden idol still whispers his promises of security through accumulation. He still offers the false satisfaction of having disguised as the true satisfaction of being. But authentic, abundance-grateful, generous, purposeful abundance remains not just possible but powerful. It is, in fact, the only force capable of driving out the spiritual emptiness that Mammon represents. Because here's the final truth: greed enslaves, but generosity liberates. Accumulation creates anxiety, but stewardship creates peace. Having more makes satisfaction impossible, but being more makes satisfaction inevitable. The choice, as always, is yours to make.